Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Slave Food Conversations. We're two African American physicians, Dr. Columbus Batiste, cardiologist, and Dr. Eric Walsh, urgent care physician and doctorate of public health, explore the role of racism as a unique form of stress and the weaponization of food in the creation of health disparities in the African American communities, irrespective of income. They discovered that eating a whole food, plant-based diet in urban communities is not only possible, but is the key to eliminating health disparities. This week's episode features Dr. Dean and Ayesha Sherzai, the co-directors of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program located at Loma Linda University. Doctors Dean and Ayesha, aka Team Sherzai, serve as neurologists, scientists, as well as public health advocates. The dynamic duo are hardcore believers in the prevention of Alzheimer's disease and overall prevention of different diseases that affect the body and the brain. The show's discussion will provide life-saving steps to counteract life-threatening illnesses such as Alzheimer's disease or even COVID that can intrude in our daily lives. As always, the Slave Food team would like to thank you for your support. Please continue to spread the word about the Slave Food Project and subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscription button. So sit back, relax, and grab a healthy snack as you listen to this very empowering episode.
Thanks, Danette. There they are. How are you both?
Thank you so much. We're good. We're so happy to be here. We love you and all that you guys do, and we feel as part of this movement. We met a few years ago, and all this time our intent was to kind of have this conversation, but many more to hopefully make a difference.
It's good to see you, Dr. Walsh. I'm glad you could join us as well.
Thank you. I'm in New Bedford, Massachusetts, in the back of a church where there's no internet. But I needed to get here, so I'm glad to be here.
We appreciate it. Thank you for having us.
And I'm very glad you can make it too, Dr. Walsh. Good to see you, brother. It's good to see you.
Sorry for
all right. And I'm gonna tell you that both of these young people here, right here, Dean and Ayesha, you guys, I'll tell you, when you meet certain people, there's something that can connect and resonate where you feel very comfortable. You feel comfortable with them, and when you connect, and that's what I felt when I met you both, and when we then followed up and had a discussion. And so it's a pleasure to have you on. You guys are such the powerhouse, and you've done such tremendous groundbreaking work with such humility. So it is a pleasure. I am just chomping at the bit to get at today's discussion. I can't tell you enough. So thank you.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm not sure if those who are tuning in or those who are going to tune in, or even if Dr. Walsh, since you all haven't had a chance to meet, I mean, I love saying the background, and you guys are such a powerful couple. How did you meet? I mean, tell me that story first. Let's start off there. How did you guys connect?
We have two versions. I have my version, and
which version do you want to hear?
No, we come from. So our grandparents are both from Afghanistan. But we grew up in the United States, but we are also very service oriented. It's our entire life, and that's was given to us from our parents, from our grandparents. Her grandfather was trained in Columbia University, surgeon, then went to Hopkins, and then became the prime minister of a country, and then created an entire. And my grandfather, same thing, and then became the minister of health and then education, the youngest person, and created women's empowerment and justice movement. And then, of course, in those countries, when you do good things, what happens? You get kicked out. So their children came here very early. We, in 2002, I was at NIH in the experimental therapeutics branch of NIH, doing some interesting work, putting BDNF and GDNF into people's brains who have, these degenerative diseases.
Wow.
And the Afghanistan situation happened, and Tommy Thompson and HHS and the World Bank came to me because I had some public health background, said, we need you to go to Afghanistan if you want to and see if you can help out. I knew a little bit of a language, so I went there initially to rebuild with the World Bank, but then Mr. Karzai asked me to become the deputy minister, which is actually a titular minister, to rebuild the whole system. And at the time I was 32 years old.
Wow.
So,
So you were the deputy. Wait a minute. You were deputy minister of health.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which in those
It's
countries,
incredible.
the ministers are titular titles. So the deputy minister does all the work. And I helped recreate the whole healthcare system around women's empowerment. With,
Yeah.
you know, I call it social jujitsu without them knowing it. So, and so that was going great. First year, second year, and we were in a party, and Ayesha had gone back.
I was a medical student, and I would, again, because I just wanted to see, you know, what my grandfather did for the country, and because of all the stories that we grew up listening to, wanted to find out more about my roots. And I'm a polyglot, so I basically worked with Doctors Without Borders, and I would go there every summer as a volunteer. And I met him at a party there.
No. Let me tell it. This is where it gets interesting.
No flowers.
So we're sitting in a party, and I'm with the other ministers, and I was by about 30 years younger than the other ministers.
All right, I think we're there.
Okay,
Yeah.
So is everybody here?
I think so.
Yeah, we're here. We just want to see you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're sitting there, and I'm talking with the other ministers, always about women's empowerment. It's always about that issue that needs to be highlighted. And all of a sudden, this young lady comes and sits next to me. That part is true. That part we agree. Yeah. So we start talking, and one of the first conversation was about women's empowerment, but the other one was about her grandfather and my grandfather, who were probably the brightest human beings we knew, who died from Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And since I had already done work on Alzheimer's at NIH, after a couple of years working there, rebuilding the system, in fact, you can PubMed. I wrote a paper that says how to empower women in third world countries through healthcare. We had done all of that, rebuild. We said we're going to come back and restart our work in preventive medicine here. So we looked around, and the top place in dementia was, or neuroscience for that matter, was UCSD with Dr. Thal. So as usual, I did a cold call. I said, I'm this person. I want to meet. And then that's how the whole journey started, where the two of us came back and did research for a few years and rebuild everything.
Losing those role models in our lives, those incredible human beings, and living in an environment where we saw how an incredibly strong person can slowly and gradually lose parts of themselves, where they couldn't recognize their children. And my mom and dad and Dean's parents had to take care of these incredible human beings. That left a mark in us, and so we wanted to contribute to the field and see what we could do.
Oh man, that's incredible. That's an incredible number one love story. Number one, for you all to meet inside of a foreign country and then come back and connect together. But it's an even more incredible origin story, right? So, we're in my family, we love movies. My wife loves movies. And so one of our favorite pastimes is kind of watching superhero movies. And every superhero has like an incredible origin story. What was their beginning? Some sort of trauma, something that happened that set them on a trajectory to fight crime or fight evil. And hearing that story in terms of Alzheimer's for both of you, it resonates with me. And we were kind of starting to chat about this backstage. My grandfather moved in with me when I was about 13 with my family with Alzheimer's. And I watched the devastation in his life and see this kind man just degrade into different people before his life finally ended. I watched the domino effect on all of my family, my mother, my siblings, my aunts and cousins. And at that time I said, this is the worst disease on the face of the earth.
Yes.
And we have to do something about it. I chose a different pathway, but I definitely understand. I don't know, Eric, if you have any thoughts on Alzheimer's or any.
No, I just know that I've seen it as a physician. It's never really touched my family, but I can tell you, I've had people, patients when I was at Loma Linda, and it's gut wrenching and heartbreaking, honestly. So anything we can do to find ways to prevent the disease, I think so far that seems like the kind of public health approach would find a way to turn back the clock on the disease. And I think, as we discussed, that's probably where we're going to head, because a lot of people can do now to try and prevent the disease in the future.
I want to kind of shed light on the emotional experience of the people going through the disease. And at the end of the day, as much as we pride ourselves, we're neurologists, we pride our humanity for its frontal lobe, its cognitive prowess, we're emotional beings. How we feel is way more important than how we think as beings. I'm not talking about as individual levels.
Yes.
I describe Alzheimer's and the journey of Alzheimer's this way. I say that, and this is metaphorical. It's like somebody is initially living in their bedroom or sleeping in their bedroom, and then they're forced to sleep in their basement. Well, I'm in California. There are no basements, but and then not really, but feeling that discomfort that I'm not sleeping, and then
getting out of your comfort zone.
Then you're in your neighbor's home, then you're in a different city, then you're in a different country where you don't understand the language, and then you're in Mars, where if there's Martians, that these Martians are coming that you don't even recognize as beings.
Yes.
It is a constant state of fear and anxiety. Even the ones that don't express it, it is a constant fear, anxiety. And that's why it's so devastating. It's not just robbing of memories. It's creating these vacuums that leave gaps of fear and anxiety.
Yes.
And we have to approach it that way, and we have to take it that seriously. And here's the thing. Although 10 years ago, what we said was controversial, which was that you could avoid Alzheimer's, you can prevent Alzheimer's, and a great number of people, it was so controversial that we would get disinvited from talks. Now it's accepted everywhere, universally. The only argument is about the percentage. The lowest percentage is 30%. We say as much as 90%. And I can guarantee you in 5 years, they'll get to 90%, where we are saying. And that's why it's so significant.
Yes. You know, I'll add to that about the fear. So my mom, thankfully, you know, I give blessings for her every single day, and she lives with us, and she turns 86. She'll hate me saying her age on the air, but she's such a beautiful woman and a beautiful soul. And I'll highlight on her as we go through your NEURO Plan later on and how she inadvertently does it. But when you speak about the fear, I'll tell you that one thing I've observed subconsciously in her is that there's also fear that she may succumb to the same fate. And that fear persists throughout life of wondering, will I have the same thing that my parent had? In other words, is my DNA my destiny? You know, and despite awareness that it's not. So that's powerful. And when we look at this thing called fear, that's one of the things that we talk about a lot. Is we talk about stress and anxiety, and in our platform we speak about the role of stress, the role of discrimination, and the role of nutritional stress in developing these health disparities and sort of this crucible of conflict. And so speak to me a little bit more about your experiences. And I'm curious, we didn't talk about this. You don't know that I'm gonna ask this question here at all, but tell me about your experience growing up in America, Afghani, but then going to Afghanistan, American. And did you experience anything that maybe was a little bit off-putting?
Well, my situation was different. I'll speak for myself first. My father was a diplomat, so we traveled quite a bit. We lived in 9 different countries growing up before I was 18 years old. And you know, there was always a positive aspect of that because you're exposed to different cultures and different traditions and different people. And my dad was just, you know, he was the kind where he would say, I'm not going to put you in a special school. Just go to the local school, you know, just go get to know the kids and learn their language. So when we went to India, I learned Hindi. When we went to different countries. So that's how he exposed us to it. It was kind of traumatic growing up as a child because, you know, you're always trying to have a sense of belonging. And, you know, once you get used to that environment, you get out of it. But, you know, looking back, I take that as a blessing because now I think the power of adaptation is faster. But yes, growing up in a country where we were privileged, where we had healthcare, where we didn't have to worry about basics, where you wouldn't have to worry about the things that are considered a normal thing. It makes you aware of how privileged and comfortable we are. And, you know, I had a role of a caregiver when I went to Afghanistan and I was volunteering. And as a woman, I was allowed to go into the villages and into the homes where no man would ever be allowed there because of their cultural norms. And so when you would go in there, when we would talk about things like vaccination and healthcare and things of that nature, you would get a sense of the the dynamics between family members. And even in such environments, women seem to be the leader, the decision makers of the family. But the differences were quite stark. And yes, you do get that sense that you're quite privileged when you live in this country. Things come easy and you don't really have to work hard for it.
Mine was a little different. I grew up in another third world country, Pittsburgh, and that was traumatic. No,
tell me you're not a Steelers fan, though, right?
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I am a Steelers through and through. Are you?
Oh my gosh! Don't tell me that. I'm a Cowboys fan. You're too smart for that.
4 Super Bowls. 4 Super Bowls. No, actually, what am I saying? 4 Super Bowls. We got 5 Super Bowls. Yeah. 6. Yeah. So yeah. We the funny thing is that we were recently invited by AT&T to go give a talk to their population, and then the whole venue was in the Dallas Cowboys practice fields. Remember the statue of Tony Dorsett?
I don't know their names.
They're lucky that I wasn't there at night. I would have. But growing up in Pittsburgh,
we're forced Steeler fans now.
I do the same to my wife.
Yes. No. So I grew up in Pittsburgh and very diverse community. We were in a Jewish community in Squirrel Hill. The same synagogue that was attacked recently in Pittsburgh we were just a street away from that synagogue. I went to school that was actually half African American, half Jewish, and I was completely outside. But it's good. I played sports, soccer, tennis, football, and all that. And that actually was great for me to kind of sense that diversity and experience the diversity and all those challenges that come, especially with kids. Going back to Afghanistan, it was ironic that I was very fish out of the water. I was very much outside. I mean, because the expectation was that I would fit in, but I didn't. And I actually felt more in tune with the parts of the community that were subjugated or not treated well, the women and others. And that's what drew my attention. That's always drawn my attention. Who needs the help in this society? I think we exist. Yeah. We simply exist to bring change. And where you bring change, where change is needed, where there's a vacuum or there's a need, those who can must. Period. There's no other, Steelers are great, but the central thing in the universe that we exist in is to help reduce suffering.
Yes.
And where it's not Afghan American, it's not this, who needs it most right now?
Absolutely.
Yes. Right this second must take our attention. And it was the same there. When I went there, I saw the women, and I don't blame people. I believe in predetermined states that must be addressed. Otherwise, you're doing magical thinking. Being a neurologist, you must identify the predetermined states and then attack it fully. And the same thing there. So that's where the social jiu-jitsu took place, where I would go. One of the most, and it's published, one of the, I think we're both very proud of is I identified 20,000 women, 6th grade educated women in these villages and that had no healthcare system, not even a clinic within hours ride. And we would train them to become nurses, but not really. It's like, how do you create ORS, oral rehydration fluid? Because that killed 90% of the children, right? Diarrhea. So ORS. How do you treat a upper respiratory, ampicillin? How do you distinguish between spotting and bleeding? Because if it's bleeding, the women must ride right now to the hospital, which is going to take 4 days.
During pregnancy.
Yeah. Wow. And that was enough. But this is also what we did. We made the clinics out of mud in a very conspicuous spot where everybody could see. You know why? Because we knew that in 3 months, it wasn't going to be just the children and women, which they agreed to. It would be the big man in the region that would get sick, and there was nobody else, and they would go like this to the young girl. You just flip the dynamics. And all of those women became leaders. That's the purpose. I think we are all here. I mean, this conversation is beautiful conversations that you're having. These are not just your talk is not just another podcast, another conversation. it is a consequential conversation at so many levels. So we love what you do at so many levels. Except the Dallas Cowboy thing, which I'll just
forget about
right now. Yeah,
we'll have to talk about that more offline. I'll see if I can kind of provide you the research, the randomized clinical trials to support my evidence there. But but here's one of the things as we shift gears and we talk about stress, we talk about discrimination as a form of stress and its impact on disease. And Eric was really profound in kind of coming up with this as we started going. But the question that he posed is, why do Black people in America live sicker and die sooner than other groups? Yeah. And so when we look at stroke, this being Stroke Month, and we look at Alzheimer's, why do African Americans suffer strokes and die from strokes at alarming rates, as well as Alzheimer's? What are your thoughts?
So there's it's multifactorial. It definitely, one thing that stands out, as physicians and as scientists, it has nothing to do with anything but access. And when you look at the bigger picture, there's always lack of access to information, access to the knowledge of what needs to be done under dire circumstances. I mean, stroke is a disease that happens all of a sudden, but the knowledge to do something about it within that window of period where there is something to be done is not dispersed widely. And so the communication and the conversations about finding therapies and about doing the right thing is not there. That's one aspect. And as far as prevention is concerned, I mean, there's no lack of information about, some of the things that we can do to prevent stroke. I think, despite all the noise about nutrition and lifestyle, despite all the fighting in the world of nutrition, I think we have enough information of what needs to be done. And I think one of the flaws, or one of the perspective that is flawed, is that health actually starts in the clinic or in the hospital. And that's not true. Health starts in the homes, in our communities, in the churches, in places where people have conversations together. And I think that's where we've been lacking. That's where the conversation needs to go, instead of these echo chambers of scientific communities and conferences talking to each other over and over again. And I think Dean and I take pride in the fact that we've kind of stopped talking about all of the esoterics, and we really want to bridge that gap between all of the knowledge that we've accumulated over decades and bring it out into the communities, because we can make a massive difference, especially in the African American communities.
Yes. You guys are doing that. For sure. What about Alzheimer's disease? I mean, that obviously is your baby as well. And seeing that this burden of disease is higher. I mean, I like I mentioned, I experienced it with my grandfather, and to be honest with you, towards the end of my dad's life, although he wasn't diagnosed with it, I definitely felt he had components, if not something on the spectrum, that was there before he passed.
If you look at the determinants of these diseases, they're fairly commonly the same. Be it Alzheimer's, be it stroke, be it cardiovascular disease, be it diabetes. We say there are 4 factors that are the drivers of a lot of these. Definitely Alzheimer's and dementias and stroke. It's inflammation, oxidation, glucose dysregulation, and lipid dysregulation. So lipid dysregulation is food and exercise. Glucose dysregulation is food and exercise. And there's a component of stress, which I'll get to in a second. Inflammation, it's injuries, both psychological, physical, as well as food and exercise. And oxidation, specifically food, especially. And so you see that there's a common denominator. And when it comes to those factors, which underlie the other factors, it's access again. As Ayesha said, access to resources. And we live right now in Redondo, but we work 2 days a week in Loma Linda. And Loma Linda is specifically the population in Loma Linda, which is the Seventh-day Adventists, are the healthiest people in the world. There's no question of that. Nobody's arguing that. They live 10 years on the average, longer and healthier than everybody else. 5 miles away, east of 10 or north of 10.
Highway 10.
Highway 10. You have San Bernardino, which is one of the unhealthiest places in the world. So obviously it's not geography. Obviously it's not. It's the fact that when you go right across 10, you can't find a healthy resource.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see more fast food stores. We see more ABCs, which is alcohol. Because that goes in those regions. So access is not available. Access to public health is not available. Access to resource of information is not available. And historically, it's the opposite. The marketing is done. The negative marketing is done on that side. McDonald's had the hardest time in the universe trying to get one McDonald's in Loma Linda.
Oh my goodness!
And
there were riots.
Yeah.
People were standing on the street speaking against it.
Yeah.
It was such chaos. But
so access is everything. Mm-hmm. Access is life. What is the cause of dementia? Well, as we said, that blood pressure is a big one. Blood pressure is the main one for a stroke is blood pressure.
Yeah.
And the blood pressure differential between populations is well known, well documented. The cholesterol, several studies show that elevated cholesterol increases your chance of Alzheimer's by 57%
during midlife. Yeah.
In midlife, 57%. We did a study where we looked at insulin resistance, pre-diabetics. So we excluded the diabetic. This is NHANES, a nationwide data, large data. Ayesha did one in a California teacher study where she's the first author there. I'm the first author in the other one. Pre-diabetes actually increased your risk of dementia by lowering your cognitive state. Mm-hmm. Who treats pre-diabetes?
And I have to tell you, right? So I hate to interrupt you, but this conversational, and I hate the word pre-diabetes, and I hate to say hate because it leads to so much havoc in the body across the board. It's like saying I'm a little bit pregnant. It is a disease state, that's there, and it has to be treated as such.
Yeah,
from cardiovascular and Alzheimer's as well.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Sorry.
We definitely.
Yeah.
No.
You're absolutely right. It's almost there's a perception that that's not diabetes. I'm not there yet. And even for moderate cholesterol, we know that there's almost a dose-response relationship that you don't have to get to that abnormal point. That every increase in your LDL cholesterol actually increases your risk for stroke, for Alzheimer's disease as well. And can you imagine? I mean, we have statistics, right? We have numbers that we get for stroke. 795,000 people have stroke every year, or for Alzheimer's disease, one every 64 seconds, somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. But can you imagine the number of people that are essentially not getting pure strokes or not getting pure Alzheimer's diagnosis, but they're living with cognitive decline. Yeah. They're living with the manifestations of this metabolic syndrome that is high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, or pre-high cholesterol. And that does affect our brain. That does affect the outcome of how we function as a human being.
I'm going to say something controversial here, and I hope it's controversial and get something going. But the numbers as far as Alzheimer's and dementia in the African American community is quoted as 2 times greater than other communities. We think it's incredibly false. It's a lie. It's way more than that, and they're not addressing it. It's not being. I'm not saying who they are. I don't know who they are, but it's not being addressed. It's not being talked about. When we give talks in these in the churches and the community centers, we're not very good at parties because we kind of detect cognitive decline very quickly. And when cognitive decline is never diagnosed, but cognitive decline is a couple of steps away from dementia.
Yeah,
and it's never diagnosed, but it's 2 to 3 or 4 years away. But that's ubiquitous. Why? Because of those factors that are not being addressed. That's why there's a profound sense of urgency in us to raise the attention, speak about it, make people a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're not making people uncomfortable, in fact, I say that everything else is management. Leadership is being comfortable with discomfort.
Yes.
Leadership means doing things outside of the box that's been done. That's what leadership is. And we must lead. We must make people uncomfortable, but in a very wise, educated, statistical, scientific way, so we can all together rise and make a difference.
Absolutely. Because here's one of the things. So I think one of the reasons you bring up that the statistics may not represent the burden of disease is probably in part, I'll say, cultural, right? That things are assumed to be part of just the norm. This is what's expected. Oh, granny or papa, papa, that's just papa.
Yeah.
Oh, that's mama. They forget a little bit. And you accept it as part of aging when it's not, does not have to be the case,
Yeah.
and it's time to be active. And that lends itself to why just today in clinic, as a patient was telling me about their challenges and difficulties, and of course wanting to turn to some sort of vitamin supplement, I directed them where? To your book. Right? I said, you know, I can sit here and tell you about nutrition and it may be similar, but I want you to go to the experts. And so I recommended your book for them because we have to intervene and be aggressive early on. And you're absolutely right about that.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
I was
Go
just
ahead,
going to jump
Dr.
real quick and say one of the other things around this is there are studies that show that even the stress, one of the stresses, of course, is discrimination, actually increases the genesis of atherosclerotic plaques. Two people on the same diet, one of them is stressed, particularly in a lot of the studies we look at. If one of them, it's discriminatory stress, it actually progresses some of these diseases. So how much multi-infarct dementia is actually happening in a population with increased stress? Never mind, to your point earlier, the lack of access to healthy foods and other things that are happening. The other thing that's interesting, you mentioned ABCs earlier. Well, there's something I just read today, CNN put out about even any alcohol at all actually negatively affects the brain. So what happens when you're with a group of people that people want drinking malt liquor and things like that, and you're over-advertised some of these things. I think it creates the tsunami that is the kind of pool of disease that you see in the African-American community in the United States.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now it's a good time to talk about the stress component. So people don't recognize the profound effect of stress, or they don't talk about it because whenever we don't have a tool for something, we kind of hide it, push it aside. It's just a defense mechanism. It's a psychological, neurological defense mechanism. So stress is too complicated. Let's go meditate. I'm not against meditation. I love meditation. We do mindful breathing, all of that. But if that's all you're doing, you're fooling yourself. If we're not addressing stress at a much higher level, at a much more intrinsic level, we're lying. This is the effect of stress. There are two main pathways, but whenever you're experiencing stress, a lot of times you're not even naming it, but if you're naming it, or if you're not feeling good, this dissonance, that actually sends on a constant basis, on a minute by minute basis. We're talk about doses of drug. Now listen to this dose of drug on a minute by minute basis. That interpretation sends a different message to your hypothalamus, which then sends a different message to your pituitary. And pituitary, being the hormone central, affects your thyroid, insulin, growth hormones, sex hormones, and through your adrenal system, your immune system. There's a reason why the biggest factor for cancer is stress, chronic stress. The biggest factor for heart disease is chronic stress. The biggest factor for stroke is chronic stress. And I would say, although this study hasn't been done and I would like to do it, is the biggest factor for dementia is chronic stress. Because it's not just one dose of bad food, it's constant, sustained, I call endocrine, hormonal, immunological chaos.
Right.
And then the second pathway is your autonomic system, which, again, same thing. If you're in a constant sympathetic survival and not a baseline parasympathetic thriving state, it's a constant vasoconstrictive survival state, which is not thriving state.
Right. And if you give an example, so our biology and our bodies were never made for chronic stress. Stress is important. It saves our lives. And if you look at our existence as an animal, these small bouts of stress essentially prepares our body to save ourselves from life.
And I've seen that. Yes. And I've seen the Cowboys players run away from the Steelers.
That is what you call delusional. This is what you call delusional now. Come on now. I'm gonna put my psychiatry hat on.
I've seen those pupils constrict and run away. But sorry guys, I had to steal that moment.
No, but literally, it's when it's okay. You're forgiven. But when you're under chronic stress, it's like you're constantly running away from the lion or the tiger. You're constantly trying to save your life. Your arteries are always constricted. Your cortisol levels are always high. Your brain is not thriving. It's burning. It's on fire from both ends. And obviously we're going to see damage. You know, Dr. Walsh, you were talking about multi-infarct dementia. That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you have high blood pressure constantly because you're in disaster, prevention mode instead of just thriving mode, obviously your system is going to get damaged very early in life. And we're seeing that.
Yes. Man, that's deep. That's deep. And it even resonates because this is the part that I love about doing this talk, right? Or rather hosting this conversation, is that in a moment, something will resonate with me. So even as you describe the hormonal cascade, we describe the autonomic cascade frequently. That's what I typically will review because of the cardiovascular input. But when you speak to the hormonal cascade and the implications on chronic disease and cancer, that's powerful. Yeah. That's powerful. And then when you resonate that with the fact that studies have confirmed that discrimination is a form of stress, absolutely, and that you can never escape from, which is part of our platform and our discussion, it's like you understand the concept of why our health is tied to our resiliency divided by our stress. The higher our stress, the poorer our health, and it just propagates itself continually. And then people turn to food. Of course, when we quote commonly, when you get stressed, what do? You turn to desserts. Stress spelled backwards is desserts, and you go at it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that comfort food that we try to go to, thinking that it's going to get rid of that pain or that anxiety that we're feeling, not knowing that the brain is structured in a way where when we are under stress, it thinks that it's starving, that a high source of energy can probably take that away. But it's not like that. It actually causes a lot more damage.
Again, more controversy. I worked at NIH experimental therapeutics, and in one study, in order to measure tremor, not even tremor, arresting tremor, I remember this is 2002, they spent nearly $100,000 on equipment. And now we are doing research at the community level, and we can't get a grant. In fact, all the research we're doing, the biggest community-based study in the world, we're doing one in beach cities and now in the African American churches and others. Guess who's supporting that, funding all of that? Us, through our books, through our work. There's no funding. They're not, and you see these esoteric. We've had, between the two of us, we've had 8 mentors with over 800 publications, and I'm gonna say it. I don't know any of those papers that had any meaning or any consequence. How many different kind of transmembrane proteins are you going to describe from 15 different angles? Yet, where we're talking about translation in the communities, where even the outcome, and here's the beauty of this kind of work. The outcome when you're looking at disparities population isn't just for disparities population. That disparity is a signal. When the signal is high, more likely to see effect. And that effect, then, if you can see it in that signal mechanism, then you can actually translate it to all communities.
Yes.
And I've been trying to explain this for decades, and we're not getting supported. And this is bewildering.
I would just jump in and say, Black community is often the canary in the coal mine when it comes to problems in America. Back in the 80s and 90s, crack was killing our communities and ripshot, and everybody said, you know what, just say no. Just say no. Now you have this opiate that is not predominantly urban, it's more suburban and even rural. All of a sudden now everybody wants to pull out all the stops to try and correct this epidemic of drug addiction. So you're right. If you're not, to me, the research on the street and in the community that actually leads to true solution is what's most important. Because if it works to help, if we had figured out a way to really beat community drug addiction and in the communities back in the 80s and 90s, we might have avoided what happened in the 2000s and the 2000 teens around opiates. But we didn't do it then. Again, there was no value in those communities, it would seem. And so now we're fighting that battle all over again, except this time it's actually probably worse.
Yeah.
So true.
It is. I did on my dissertation, I did CBPR. Community-based participatory research and community-based participatory action. And all that is basically listening. How unique, that was a very fancy word for listening. and research that's based on listening. So one of the reasons that a lot of the research in disparities communities, minority communities have failed is because of this. So up to recently, or even now, a questionnaire is created in 50-year-old white men in Boston and then applied to 70-year-old Hispanic women in San Bernardino. And when it doesn't get the outcome, they say it failed. Yeah. The study failed, or the intervention failed, or the people failed. Yeah. No, it's because you have to look at the nuance of every community and then adapt to that by listening. And listening is not just through ear. Listening is to being sensitive to the differences, and then adjusting. This is not a soft concept. It's not a, let's hug each other concept. It's a scientific concept.
Right.
Yeah.
It's scientific.
It's a lost skill.
Yeah. To think that science is binary is very dumb. Mm-hmm. If science is two mechanisms, it's actually very dumb. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use the word dumb. To know that science is complex, that human emotion, human environment, human effect, human response, and the complexity therein is part of that interaction that truly measures the intervention, the behavior, and the outcome. That's a smart way to look at it. That's called listening.
Love it, love it, love it. I'm gonna tell you, we say oftentimes that resources go where value is placed. And I think what you all describe is just where people displace their value. They don't place value inside these communities, inside our communities. And that's the biggest problem that leads to this disparities. And you all have placed value in the community, and you place resources there to follow with the value that you've assigned. And that's what's so beautiful about the work that you're doing. And we'd be remiss if we didn't spend, and my wife gets on me all the time, that oftentimes I'm talking more so about the problem and less about the solution. So I want to pivot for a second here and tell us about the solution. Tell us about the NEURO Plan. Tell us about this 30-day jumpstart, right? and let's go from there.
I guess we're part of the solution right now. This conversation that we're having, and for you all to allow for people to comment and to listen, and for all of us to dissect the problem, that is the solution. We've long waited for something to happen from top, but I think the real solution begins when people start feeling agitated and point to what the problem is. And it's between these uncomfortable communications or conversations is when we can actually begin creating language that will slowly and gradually shift to cultural change. As far as we've completely dedicated ourselves to look into the science of brain health and for us to disperse this message out into the communities. And essentially the message is brain health starts early. It's never too early to think about brain health, and it's never too late to think about brain health. And that the power is in people's hands, which means that they can actually start bringing changes into their homes and in their lifestyles. And we've created these, very self-serving acronyms called the NEURO Plan, things that are easy to remember, but it essentially points to factors in our lifestyles that determine these risks that end up in stroke and dementia. So for example, in our book, we talk about nutrition. We talk about the NEURO Plan, which stands for nutrition, exercise, unwind, or stress management, which is literally and figuratively in the center of neuro. It's good. It's about increasing good stress and eliminating bad stress. That's a whole nother talk. R is for restorative sleep, getting 7 to 8 hours of deep restorative sleep, because that's the time when the brain cleanses itself. And then O, the additional one that we added, was optimizing cognitive activity, having activities socially or cognitively that keeps us engaged, that creates a purpose in our lives and a vector for us to keep working towards it.
And then because we're behaviorists, the thing that we really take pride in, and the 1 month program is the title is maybe a little misleading, because people think that we mean that in 30 days we solve all problems. In 30 days, we set the foundation of what we take pride in, which is habit creation.
Yes.
Yeah. And without habit creation, it's always an extraneous act. It's the next diet, the next exercise program, until it becomes inculcated into your very fiber, into your own self, then it's not going to be a long-term thing. So our thing is to help people bring neuro into their very essence. And it's not hard. By the way, you don't have to buy any magic jellyfish pills. You don't have to buy that.
That was the supplement they asked me about. Was just that
gosh.
And I was like, what?
I tell them that whenever you hear these incredible supplements with these amazing names, like something cog this or this, it's a young man who now is in some island making money off of you because he found the right .com and the right trademark, and now he's making money off of you. That's basically it.
Right.
The answers are simple foods, simple motion in your environment, stress management techniques that you can actually bring into your family, sleep, and not just through pills, but sleep hygiene and cognitive behavioral therapy. And then mental activity is a big, big factor. They've shown that people who have higher education have great reserve for cognition, but it's not about education. It's about cognitive activity around your purpose. We did a meta-analysis, which was published in 2018. It's around finding challenging activities around your purpose. Mm-hmm. And it could be music. It could be this,
Now, I've heard you do this, and I really want you to go through, because I'll tell you, this captivated me, and not a lot of things captivate me anymore. But I heard you guys, I always like to research and listen to several different talks that you've done to frame the context. And you went through a way in which you described playing card games, music, cooking, and how it stimulates various aspects from the neural aspect there. And so I think it was very practical, it was very well put. Take us through that a little bit, if you recall. I hate to put you on the spot like that.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So the optimized component is good stress. Ayesha, I will leave the food stuff to you because it's a big section. But cognitive activity is positive stress. The brain needs tension. The brain needs a purpose of survival and tension. And now we've made it nuanced. And if it's not being pushed, it actually pulls back there and shrinks. So you need to challenge the brain around your purpose. Now let's take, Sudoku is great, crossword puzzles are great, but let's take a musical instrument. I always bring this example, playing the guitar. Ayesha is a professional singer, amazing, but I'm a terrible guitar player. But I love playing it, the cacophony that I create. But when you're playing a musical instrument, let's say you're reading the notes, that's your left parietal for most people. You're visually processing, it's your occipital lobe. You're cognitively processing, it's your frontal lobe. You're being creative, it's your right parietal lobe. You're emotionally involved, it's your limbic emotional brain. You're being dexterous with your fingers, that's your motor cortex. That's your entire brain on fire. Mm-hmm. That's no Sudoku. That's a brain. Take dancing. You're learning how to dance. As bad as I'm in guitar, I mean, even worse than dancing. I know for a fact.
Sorry, I listen, I'm a champion dancer from back in high school. I haven't done it for years.
I was about to say that, yeah.
And I see my wife shaking her head no, but you know what? I was a magical dancer back in the day. Sorry, go ahead.
Where people, are strong in one thing, they're weak. You're great in dancing, but not in your judgment of sports teams. But that's okay. yeah. But the dancing or leading managing a program like this, where you have to study and learn and talk, and that's cognitive activity, which grows the brain. Here's the magical part. Science, pure science. 87 billion neurons. Each of them can make a couple of connections, or as many as 30,000 connections per neuron. And how do you do that? Through these kind of activities. Mm-hmm. And that you can do for the rest of your life. Now, if we add this, is there any cost? There's nothing. You don't even have to buy our book. You should, but you can. It's about bringing it into your life. Good food, and Ayesha will explain that.
Yeah.
Movement throughout the day, stress management, sleep, and this.
Love it. Tell us about the food.
Oh yeah,
we can't beat the food.
I just went quiet a little bit to see if Danette had any questions, but
yeah, I do.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, Danette. But briefly speaking, I think Columbus. You and I have we have talked about this in the past as well. And when you look at the plethora of information that has come to us over decades, despite all the noise, we know that when people eat unprocessed, more plant-based, they do so much better. And, you know, when I say plant-based, it doesn't necessarily have to be entirely plant-based. Every small increment of change towards that goal makes a huge difference. And that was a subject of my research in the California teacher study. We actually saw some mathematical gradations of change towards the positive when people ate more unprocessed plant foods. And, you know, good food, healthy foods, they don't have to be, not delicious. They don't have to be difficult. They can be easy, tasty, and healthy at the same time. And I think that's what the message is.
And this book, the second book, it has behavioral and all of the other stuff, but 75 recipes. Ayesha, when she was doing her fellowship in stroke in Columbia University, in the mornings, she would be in ICU, and at night in culinary school. And the reason for that is, if we don't give people the tools to bring into their life, and it's an unusual food that they've never eaten, or it's too difficult or too expensive, it's just another self-aggrandizing endeavor.
Yeah, and so there's a question here with regard to, you know, how you treat your Alzheimer's patients when you get them. Is there, and it sounds like you kind of just explained some of the things that you recommend in terms of people doing, but how do you treat your Alzheimer's patients?
First of all, one of the things that I want to say that some of the, even our plant-based world and others are kind of making claims that they can reverse Alzheimer's. No, you can't reverse Alzheimer's. That's criminal. That's we would have sold millions more books if we just hinted at that. That's not going to happen, and it's unfair to the families. It's playing with people's hopes. But when somebody has dementia, it's critical to kind of know that you can potentially affect its course and slow it down through lifestyle intervention. But even that should be taken into consideration with the patient in mind. That level of change, if they're not, into that kind of food, that kind of movement, that kind of mental activity, to do it now at age 70, 75, to that level, where's the cost benefit, right? So you have to really take that into consideration. The other thing about patients with dementia, which are fully in the thralls of dementia and Alzheimer's, is to know that their anxiety and stress is central. And that's critical to know. Yeah. And we treat that more than we treat the memory disorders.
Okay. And so do you guys have any studies or any research on benefits of healthy blood flow in the brain, similar to like yoga or different types of activities that increase blood flow in the brain?
Oh, yes. One of the activities that increases blood flow to the brain is exercise. We know that our legs are actually the biggest pump in our bodies, more than the heart. And when people exercise, and especially with
Wait a minute, more than the heart? Come on now.
No,
I mean, first the Steelers, now you're putting down my heart.
No.
We're
Time
gifting you.
Going back.
No. We're gifting you. Now you are a cardiologist, and we're giving the legs to you as well.
So funny.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
We've expanded your domain.
The good thing is, when you take care of the heart, you've taken care of the brain, and vice versa. There was a time when people used to think that the brain was a completely different organ, that it didn't get affected by lifestyle risk factors, but that's not true. The same kind of arteries that the rest of the body has, that the heart has, the brain has it as well. And it's a very, very active organ. It's only about 3 pounds. It's like a jello when you hold it. It's about 2% of your body's weight, but at any moment it consumes 25% of the body's energy. So it's a very active organ, and it requires a lot of oxygen and blood. So when you keep yourself busy and active physically, good heart, good legs, don't skip leg days, that actually improves circulation.
Yes.
I saved myself there, right?
You saved yourself. Otherwise, they were never going to invite us again. Yeah.
So with regard to just really simplifying the definition between Alzheimer's and dementia, like how would you be able to, how do you describe the difference?
So Alzheimer's is the umbrella category. Dementia is the umbrella category. Dementia is basically anytime you have cognitive deficits, be it because of memory or processing, to the extent where you can't do one or more of your daily activities, you can't drive, or you can't take care of your finances, or you can't go shopping, not because of physical limitations, but because of mental limitations, that's dementia. That basically umbrella. There are many types of dementia. Alzheimer's is the biggest one. 60 to 70% of all dementia is Alzheimer's. But then there's frontotemporal lobe dementia, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's dementia, Huntington's dementia, many different types. Alzheimer's just happens to be the biggest dementia type.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so some of the other questions that we have, and I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but when it comes to like early signs, you know, what are you guys seeing as early signs?
So there's always this myth that the first sign or symptom of early cognitive impairment is memory problems. It doesn't have to be memory problems. We now know that when people live an unhealthy life, or when they have high risk of developing dementia or Alzheimer's, when we use dementia and Alzheimer's synonymously, it's basically meaning memory problems. The pathological changes actually start decades earlier. We've actually known that people tend to have inflammatory changes and oxidative changes in their brain even 2 decades before the first sign of any memory impairment. So I think it's best. This also doesn't mean that we should always be scared and stressed that we're going to get Alzheimer's disease. You know, I had 2 grandparents each. I know I probably am at a higher risk because of the role of the genes that play with it. Just live and assume that you have the risk and live a very, very healthy life. And always make sure that if, say, for example, a relative or an elderly person in the family or someone outside of your family, if they tend to have memory problems, that's not normal. There was a time when memory problems were considered normal. Columbus, you said that, you know, later in life. The word senility has been used often over and over again. That's not appropriate. There are a lot of individuals who live a very long, cognitively vibrant life, and it is possible, and we should address it as soon as possible.
And so are there different stages to Alzheimer's diseases?
We consider the first and second stage are before you even have any memory disorders. You know, the 20 years that Ayesha was talking about. So those it's very difficult to move 30-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 40-year-olds into action because they feel immortal. Now I'm a little outside of that window, so I can say they, you know. but them, yeah. So, but they should know that those attention, the focus that's being affected, most likely is a sign of pathology that can be averted. That's where you actually start this lifestyle, the neuro lifestyle, where you can start the nutritional changes, the exercise, the focus and meditation and stress management. And if you do it at that stage, you significantly reduce your risk. Although you reduce it at any age, but especially the earlier you start, the better. Right. And stage 3 is what they call mild cognitive impairment. It's a diagnosis. In fact, it's a ICD-10. It's a medical diagnosis where they're having memory problems, but more than expected. They can still do their daily activities, but everybody's noticing it now.
Right.
And of course, it goes from there.
But the challenge is now, especially after COVID, you know, we're seeing that attention deficit or the ability to stay focused. You're seeing that earlier. You know, we're seeing it in our teenagers. Yeah. So are we saying that, you know, in terms of some of this, it's presenting at an earlier stage, or is the stress of what's going on in life just really taking people out of their ability to focus?
Yeah.
So I'm writing something about focus is the gatekeeper of consciousness. You are as conscious as that moment that you become, the signal comes to the surface and you're aware of things around you. That focus is critical. You know, when those chess players can play 15 people blindfolded, it's not because of their IQ, although as it happens, those guys have pretty high IQs as well, but it's actually, they've developed that level of focus. Focus is critical. And the thing that affects memory the most is focus or lack thereof. What affects focus? Stress, anxiety, depression, certain medications, pain medications, alcohol. So
lack of physical activity,
lack of sleep,
bad food, lack of sleep,
or terrible food. When they say food coma, there's a reason they're calling it food coma. Well, that's not what they were calling it, but it is that. It's that where you're actually overwhelming the central nervous system with bad food. So the increased amount of focus problem is because of the increased amount of stress and the environment that has led to bad food, lack of movement, and all of those things. Now, is this going to have consequences 10 years down the road? I would say most likely. And that's why even to that, I say there's a sense of urgency address that even in the context of COVID and isolation.
Right. And so would you say, as it relates to the children, that the best thing to do is to get them out, get some sunlight, get them moving, and as well as depending on no matter what your age is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are, our biology requires movement. We require being active. We require sunlight. And if there is lack of this cyclical exposure to life, to sun, to outdoors, to activities, to good food, then, everything falls apart. The good thing is you can always build your focus at any time and at any age.
There's a reason that dopamine, which is this pleasure hormone, and positive or negative addiction hormone, is also your movement hormone. It's not hormone, neurotransmitter. Yeah. So there's a reason that movement is directly connected to motivation. Movement is directly connected to pleasure as well. So movement is critical. We got to get those children out to walk and run and get in the sun. And then the sun. One of the in our program, the first thing we tell people, even before food or anything, the first habit is a morning brisk walk. Yeah. Why? You're resetting the cortisol. You're resetting the melatonin. You're getting sun, which wakes you up, this elation and energy and the walking. So absolutely, those things are central. They're more powerful than any drug we have out there.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Couldn't have said any of that information better myself. You guys are incredible. So we're wrapping up this final segment. This has been an incredible. I'm looking at some of the comments of folks who've just thoroughly enjoyed you and our time here together. And I didn't see this one written, but I don't know. I'm getting like this sense that people want me behind the scenes to really work on you and to provide you this randomized studies to work on. Now you have to at least tell me, are you a Lakers fan at least?
Oh, of course.
Of course.
All right. I'll give you a little pass now. I'll give you a little pass. But I want you to, besides, I want you to, number one, tell the folks where they can find you. Tell them your website. I want you to tell them about the book and this book that they need to purchase for themselves and for someone else. The third thing, and then I want you to leave them with words of wisdom as we round out things.
I'll leave the words of wisdom to you, but we'd be happy to connect with you. So we go by Sherzai MD on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're sherzaimd.com or teamsherzai.com on the website. Our book is called The 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution, and we're just so glad to be connected with you all.
And the words of wisdom is that we are all connected in so many ways, yet we create artificial segregations and separations because we are little children psychologically finding comfort in the little walls that we create. The more we open up through the walls, the more we open up through the barriers that we create, the more we help ourselves, because in understanding others, we understand ourselves better. And leadership is in being comfortable with discomfort. So if there's the way we've raised our kids, the most important thing beyond education is being comfortable with discomfort, asking the questions that make you uncomfortable, going to places that make you uncomfortable, well, safe places, and making sure that in that discomfort you find a much higher meaning and purpose and reason to live.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Amen. Yes. Listen, it's been incredible. And you all completely exude everything that you tout in your book, on your website, when you even have on there empowering communities to take advantage of their health. That's almost a sense of the script that we have for Healthy Heart Nation, really about empowering communities to take advantage to excel. And so it's been an honor. It's been truly an honor. I've actually had fun, with you all here today. I've learned some stuff, and you're teaching people to build. I've coined this after working with this business person I told you about earlier. You have to build the business of you, and that's what you all are doing. Is you're helping people lay the foundation of building the business of you. And the steps to that are, first you have to plan, you have to invest, and you have to execute. And so those are the key quintessential components. And so that's what I want to leave the audience with today. Right? Go out, and I want you to invest in this book, invest in the Alzheimer's solution, invest in a 30-day plan to get yourself springboarded towards the health that you need. And so it's a pleasure. I can't wait till the next time we're able to kind of be in the same place and we can meet up. And Danette, do we have any extra Cowboys jerseys, Tony Dorsett, that we can share? We want to definitely do that, but it has been.
We'll discuss that over dinner. You guys are
Sure.
cooking dinner. Yeah, it's going to be a long conversation.
And we're also getting a lot of requests for a part 2 with this, so we'll definitely see what we can do with regard to getting that scheduled in, because it's very important. And what you guys have shared are simple, basic things, and so as it relates to really focusing on the solution versus the problem. What can we do now? What can we do, to improve our health, day by day? And it doesn't have to be as complicated. It doesn't have to be buying an expensive pill and swallowing that pill to give you the cure, when you have been given the tools to make your life better. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
It's our pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you so much, Danette.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we're going to go ahead. I want to give acknowledgement to Healthy Heart Nation and the work that they're doing in sponsoring this. And behind the scenes, you have Brian Hardy and, of course, the moderator, Danette Batiste. And we want to encourage everyone on the show who's tuning in right now, be sure to follow us at Slave Food, subscribe, Slave Food Project. Follow us at _ Slave Food on Instagram and at Slave Food here. It's been a pleasure seeing you all, and we'll check you out next time. Thank you.
Absolutely. See you.
Bye.